So today we're going to do a little bit of primitive archery hunting. I'm out in the beaver pond behind my house and noticed that with the summer heat the water's really starting to dry up. There's just a few remaining pools. And with that, all the frogs that lived in this big area are now condensed into these tiny pools. They're sitting along the banks and they're pretty easy to find. And these are bullfrogs. They're not a native species here out in the West, and they're actually considered an invasive species that does quite a bit of damage. They eat the native frogs and reptiles and whatever animal they can get their mouth around. So we're going to take care of these invasive species using primitive archery gear. The arrow I'm going to be using is an Ishi style arrow. I've showed how to make this arrow in the past. It's a compound arrow made out of ocean spray with a mountain mahogany foreshaft. And the arrowhead we're using is a glass arrowhead. I showed how to make this just a few weeks ago on a YouTube video. It's a gorgeous arrowhead made out of a glass bottle that I found in a junkyard. And it is fragile because it's glass, but it should do the job on these frogs. And by the end of the day, I'll be surprised if it's not broken, but we'll see. It should perform very well. The bow I'm going to be using is this bow. It's one of my most prized possessions. It was given to me. It's a gift from a guy named Nick. He's a fellow YouTuber. His YouTube channel is called The Backyard Bowyer. And he's written some books and has published a lot of YouTube videos on how to make these bows out of PVC pipe. This is a great bow. It is 55 inches long and 55 pounds at 28 inches. It's made out of Schedule 80 PVC, and he used some polish to make it look just like wood, and it performs great. I've shot this bow a lot and I love it, and so it should work perfect for this frog hunt. The frogs sit along the banks of these pools and they let you get pretty close. If they think that you don't see them, they'll hold tight. So I'm going to try to set up the camera and then see if I can get the shot and actually hit these frogs. And then at the end of the day, we're going to fry up some frog legs. So it should be a good dinner and good practice. So come join me. So that glass arrowhead did a great job. It killed that frog pretty quickly and it didn't break. So now we can go shoot a bunch more frogs. So overall, we had a very good primitive archery hunt for frogs. There was a lot of frogs out there and they allowed for some good shots. I missed several, but I also got 5. And these aren't huge frogs, but there's enough here that I can get a little snack off of the legs. So I'll cook those up. The primitive arrow performed very well on this hunt. The biggest problem I had was my sinew wrappings got wet and came undone. So I did not lose my arrowhead. It did not break. I found it in the mud, but it did come off, and so I started just hunting with a blunt. But for the few frogs that it did hold on, it was pretty devastating. So it's a good arrowhead, and just have to watch out for that sinew. It does get wet and soften and come loose. Next step is to cut these legs off and let's cook them up. I'm going to fry them on a fire in a pan with some bear fat. So now we're ready to clean our frog legs, and to do that I'm going to use a sharp piece of obsidian. I'm just going to flip them over, and there's a line right there. And I'm just going to cut it off right there at the line. Separates very easily. And then you got these good meaty legs here, the frog legs. Now that we have our frog legs separated from the body, the next thing we're going to do is remove the lower feet, the flippers. And the final step for preparing the frog legs is to remove the skin. And it just peels off. Frog meat is interesting yellow color. Now we'll take the skin off the other leg. It slides right off. And it's that easy. You just cut the body off, cut the feet off, pull the skin off, and you're ready to fry. I'm going to fry this in our cast iron little skillet in bear fat on the coals, but first we got to do the rest of the frogs. So 4 of these pairs of frog legs look really good, and I'm ready to cook them and eat them. This last pair I'm not going to eat, and I'll show you why. So one thing you want to be aware of anytime you're eating wild animals is cooking the meat properly to kill internal parasites. I cut the legs off this frog, and there's all these weird yellow things, and when I look closer they're actually moving. They're a kind of worm or some kind of internal weird parasite that lives in the muscle tissue. I didn't know frogs had such weird internal parasites living in their muscle, but this one sure does. Look at that thing crawling around. I don't know what these are, so if you know what kind of parasites these frogs have, leave a comment down below. It's a good reminder, you always want to cook wild meat really well because you never know what kind of parasites they have. Another interesting thing I found inside one of these bullfrogs is it had eaten a native tree frog. Just a reminder that these are invasive species that are doing damage to our native frog species. So hopefully those who want to leave hate mail for me about loving frogs, these are frogs that are doing quite a bit of damage, and it's a good thing to kill them and to eat them. So we're going to place our cast iron pan right on the coals there. Then we're going to place some bear lard in there. Let it get nice and hot and sizzling, and then we're going to cook our frog legs. I have a video on how to render bear lard if you're interested in that process. Our oil is now sizzling hot, and it's time to place the frog legs on the oil. So our frog legs have turned a nice golden crispy color on the outside, and it's pulling away from the bone, and they're done. They're now ready to be eaten and enjoyed. So here's our frog legs after they're fully cooked. Still a little yellow meat and flaky, comes off the bone and is flaky similar to a fish. I love eating frog legs. The meat is really tender and flavorful. It reminds me of a cross between white flaky fish and a good fried chicken wing. It's especially good fried in that bear fat. I can see why it's a delicacy around the world and served in the finest French restaurants. Thanks for coming on this primitive archery hunt with me.